I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. As most of you guys know, the recruiting industry has been hit hard, harder than most industries out there. And finding a job as a recruiter is tough. It is probably one of the toughest things that I've seen and the toughest markets I've seen in years. So I have a special guest with me, Melissa Grabiner, to talk about the secrets of finding your next opportunity as a recruiter. We're going to talk about what's working, what's not working, and why you need to make some shifts in your strategy now. So, Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So, before we get started, Melissa, can you talk about some of the things that you're doing before you jump into how you even ended up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Yes, so absolutely. So, first off, I'm based in Chicago and I have been in the HR and talent acquisition space for 25 years. So, I spent the bulk of my career at a company called Takeda Pharmaceuticals. I was there for 18 years. And the first 10 years, I was a senior HR business partner. And then the last 8 years, I was the global director of recruiting for our largest global business. And so I had a team of 11 direct reports. We hired about 3,000 employees a year, which is roughly one out of every two hires globally for the company with the business that I oversaw. I had a lovely, amazing career there, 18 years, and then I ended up leaving. And currently, I work at a company called One Digital, where I work with predominantly biotechnology and pharmaceutical startups. Most of them are in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I help them with all of their talent acquisition needs. So, some clients I come in to hire employees, other clients I've come in to basically build out their entire talent acquisition infrastructure to include processes, technology, headcount, budget. So all my clients are different, but I love working in talent acquisition. It's a great field, and there's nothing I'd rather be doing, and I've been very blessed with my career.
So, like you kind of talked about how you got into recruiting. Like, why did you choose the TA track, the recruiting track, rather than the HR track?
Yes. So great question. So actually, it kind of found me. So this is an interesting story. So I was working at, like I said, I was working at Takeda Pharmaceuticals and I was a senior HR business partner. And the business that I supported, we had facilities all over the country and everyone was doing their staffing in their own way. So there was no consistent processes, procedures. The senior leaders of the business that I was working under actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We really need to start a department of recruiters and we want you to spearhead this department." And I was given pretty much an open-ended budget. I could hire the people I needed. I could bring in the technology I needed. I was basically given an open slate and was told, "Do with this as you see fit to build up this department." And so recruiting was not something I ever really thought about doing, but when the business leaders, I felt so honored that they asked me to do this and had the confidence in me, and I love a challenge, so I thought, I'm gonna give this a shot, and then, years later, it turned out to be, the biggest department from a TA standpoint globally across the company. And then when I left the company, I just loved recruiting so much that I decided to continue down that path and explore other opportunities in talent acquisition. Looking back, it was a blessing in disguise that, the leaders had the confidence in me to kind of spearhead this department. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I've been very blessed.
That's awesome. And before we start jumping into the meat of the conversation, you're now supporting multiple companies. Like, how is that? Like, exciting, constantly changing.
I love it. So right now I have one client. There were a couple times where I had multiple clients, and that got a little challenging because every client had needs, and their needs were the most important needs. So a lot of it was like balancing and prioritizing. But I've had one client for over a year, and it's much better this way because it's much easier to manage and handle. The company I work with, they place me on assignments. I have to interview with these companies, and they have to agree to bring me on as a consultant. But I've never had an issue with the company wanting me to work for them as an extension of their TA or HR department, just because of the experience that I bring to the table with these organizations. I have a really, really good job. I'm very blessed. I work 40 hours a week. Prior to coming here, I would easily be, clocking in 60-hour weeks, you know, month after month, year after year. And so this allows me to have significantly better work-life balance. And I love working for the biotech pharmaceutical space. I There's nothing I'd rather be doing. So super
Awesome.
lucky.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump right in and talk about the job search when it comes to recruiting. What have you seen over the past year and a half when it comes to the recruiting market and your thoughts on it?
It's an incredibly difficult market right now for recruiters. And as I think everyone who reads the news understands and knows that there have been a rash of layoffs in these last couple of years. Typically, when companies are laying off their staff, they're not necessarily hiring staff. And so if a company is not hiring, they don't need recruiters. So as a result, so many organizations have let go of their recruiting function, and it has made a oversaturation of very talented recruiters in the market. I have been in recruiting in HR long enough to know, however, that the pendulum every couple of years changes. Right now, it is an employer driven market. It will once again be an employee driven market where companies cannot hire fast enough. But it's a really tough time right now for recruiters for sure, because there's so much great talent out there that are looking for jobs. And typically, when a company has a need, they need to fill one or just a couple recruiting roles. They don't need to hire a team of 20 recruiters. So the competition right now, if you are working in talent acquisition, is incredibly fierce. However, I do believe that this will not be a forever thing. And I do believe that it will change, hopefully within the next year. I have amazing, talented recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn literally on a daily basis, asking me if there's anything I can do to help with their job search. And I'll help as many people as I can. But the truth of the matter is that, and I say this based on what I see and based on just my, very strong involvement with LinkedIn, is that there are just an incredible amount of incredible recruiters looking for jobs. And it's a tough time to be a recruiter for sure.
Like, I have my theories on how we got here, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts. Like, how did we end up in this environment for recruiters?
I think a lot of it is just because so many companies are laying off their staff and they're on hiring freezes, or they are halting hiring or pulling back the reins. And so naturally, if companies aren't hiring, the recruiters are the first to go because they can't justify keeping recruiters on their staff if there's no positions to fill. But again, everything is cyclical. And I believe that the job market will significantly turn around sooner versus later. And once again, these recruiters that are out of work, I believe, will have a much easier time finding a job because there's going to be a lot more job openings for recruiters. But no, I'm definitely interested in your thoughts on this as well.
I mean, it goes into a little bit of like economics and cheap money and money getting expensive on like compounded with overhiring is
Mhm.
some of my thoughts. And the pendulum swung way farther than it should have. And we were all, unfortunately, many of us were just caught off guard on how the market so quickly changed.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I did when I was managing a team of I had a team of 11 direct reports at Takeda, and I had a slew of contractors working under me as well. When we went through a downturn of hiring with the business I supported, I did everything I could to save those recruiter jobs. So what I did was I spoke to pretty much all the business leaders across the different functions in within my business, and tried to find out if there's a way that I could temporarily take my recruiters and put them in those departments. And then at the time when hiring would pick back up, which of course I knew it would, this way I didn't have to hire from scratch. I was able to salvage those jobs. Those folks were able to pick up additional skills by working in another department. And then they brought those skills back with them into my department. So it was a win win for everyone. And what I really hope business leaders do and think about is, instead of being so quick to lay off your recruiters, are there other departments within the company that they can be placed at on a temporary basis? Hiring from scratch and externally is incredibly expensive and it's incredibly time consuming. But if you have these recruiters already on your payroll that know the business, they know the job, they can do the job, try to see if there's a way that you can save those jobs and put them in other positions, even if temporarily, because this way you don't have to lay off your recruiters. And what's going to happen to, I think, a lot of these companies that did lay off their staff is that there will come a time, hopefully sooner versus later, that business is going to pick up again and they're going to need to hire, and they're going to have to, for the most part, hire from scratch. That's not an easy thing to do. So I would highly, highly encourage business leaders before they think about laying off their recruiters. Are there other ways you can repurpose those individuals? Because again, it's only a win-win for everybody involved.
I've seen great leaders talk about that. I've seen very few leaders actually do that, unfortunately.
And I think part of it, and I don't mean to sound harsh about this, but I think a lot of people is if their job isn't affected, they don't necessarily care as much because they have a job and they're safe. So perhaps they don't go to bat and try to get other, these recruiters other positions, which I think is very short sighted. I think in order to be strategic and be a good leader is, look at all your options before you lay off. And if you have to lay off, have that be your absolutely last option. Because when someone is laid off, it affects them, it affects their families, it affects their well being, mentally, financially. If there's a way to salvage those jobs, do it. Because I'm telling you, hiring from inception is incredibly time consuming. It can be very, very costly, and if you need to fill jobs at your company, you need recruiters. And if you don't have those recruiters in place, your hiring plans are going to be greatly slowed down. That's not going to serve the business good at all.
No, 100%, 100%. And for the leaders out there that are hearing this and thinking this, like, where are some places that you can quickly put a recruiter that
I
could,
mean, think of it too this way. And the reason I did what I did is because recruiters have such great transferable skills that could really go into any other department. Now, sure, if one of my recruiters is temporarily going to work in the supply chain department, they will have to get trained. But these folks already know the business. They understand the customers. They don't have to get onboarded, outside of like with their new maybe day-to-day responsibilities, but they don't have to get onboarded within the company. And right there, that's half the battle is you don't have to kind of start from scratch. And if, when I was leading a team of recruiters, and I think this is a way for all recruiters, they're great at managing their time. They're great at juggling multiple responsibilities. They're great at being strategic and being a true business partner. All those intangibles, those are things that are transferable. You can teach someone how to do a specific job, maybe outside of like law or software engineering. But a lot of the jobs that you can transfer those recruiters into, there will be a little bit of training. But again, you're not having to train someone on the culture of the company or what the business does or who the competitors are or what are the main products. They already know that information. So right there, you're ahead of the game. So that's why I highly encourage, business leaders to be thoughtful and methodical and strategic about this, because there are recruiters that have incredibly great transferable skills that can benefit any department.
and when they come back, like the time of being embedded in that division, they'll come back and be super recruiters for those teams.
Absolutely. And they're going to be the biggest strong ambassador you have for your company because they will realize that you did what you could do to salvage those jobs and appreciate the fact that they didn't lose their job. They're only going to work that much harder. And that's exactly what happened with my team. Bit by bit, piece by piece, they slowly started coming back to my department. And never in my entire career of managing people have I ever lost someone due to a resignation, ever. And I think part of that is because I took care of my team. I always looked out for their best interests and I did everything I could to make sure that they didn't lose their job. And in turn, they were so loyal to me because they really appreciated those efforts. So again, like I said, it's definitely a win-win for everybody involved.
All right. Now we're going to jump over to the job search. If you're hopping on LinkedIn, so often, if you look at a recruiting job, you see like an easy 1,000 applications. Like it's become the new norm. How do you even get past all those applications to actually get to the interview?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is being strategic and being smart, right? So I will tell you myself, if I was on LinkedIn and I saw a job posting that had 1,000 applicants, I wouldn't apply because it's a numbers game. And realistically, your chances are going to be really, really small of even having your resume land in front of that recruiter. The beautiful thing about LinkedIn, and I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn, I'm incredibly involved in the platform, is you can basically find a gold mine of information. So, what I would suggest, and this is to anyone who's looking for a job, is if you see a job posted, try to find out who the recruiter is at that company, or maybe the head of HR, or maybe the head of the talent acquisition team, and an email or an in-mail to them directly on LinkedIn. Attach a copy of the resume, give a brief paragraph or description of who you are, why you're interested in the role. People do this for me all the time, like for my client companies. I get a lot of direct messages daily from individuals. And when someone takes the time to do that and reach out to me, I always look at their resume and I always appreciate that because it's making my job easier in a way as a recruiter. So I would say, if for anyone, if they see a job posting on LinkedIn, don't just apply and hope and pray that you're going to get a call. Be proactive about it. Find out again who those heads of HR, maybe even the CHRO. I've heard of people reaching out directly to the CEO, depending on the size of the company. But by doing this, you're going to be in the forefront of that person's mind, even the decision maker, like the recruiter. That's how you're going to stand out. It's not posting your resume and praying and hoping and fingers crossed that you're going to get a call. You have to take that extra measure to get in front of the hiring manager or the recruiter. That's how you can stand out from other applicants.
So you're saying that the recruiter needs to put the recruiting hat back on and do the recruiting job a little bit to get past the 1,000 applications.
Yeah. I mean, I think no one knows how to recruit better than recruiters and how to kind of navigate the job search. I could tell you, like, when I was looking for a job, this is a great story. The job I have now, I found on LinkedIn by reaching out to the president of my company. I lost my past job. I wrote a list of targeted companies I wanted to work at. I did my homework on LinkedIn and I came across this company, which is where I work now. And it seemed incredibly intriguing to me. And I did some sleuthing and found out who the CEO is. I literally sent her a message on LinkedIn. And it was a very nice note. It wasn't too lengthy, but it was, this is my name. This is what I do. This is why I'm interested. Here's my resume. And within 2 weeks, I had a job offer in hand, and I'm coming up on 3 years at the organization. So taking that extra time makes a huge difference. And if I just submitted to the job, there's a very good chance that my resume would have fallen within the ATS and never been looked at. But I took it upon myself to find out who the CEO is. And some people would say that's ballsy, but you know what? When you're looking for a job, you got to be ballsy. You got to do what you have to do. And those are the steps that it took. But hey, I ended up getting a job there. So
Oh,
I am a perfect example that doing things like that works and don't ever shy away from it. The worst that can happen is you don't get a return message, but at least you knew you tried.
and it's one of those things I have seen so few recruiters actually do. Like, I
Yeah.
know it's easy to, like, apply. It's easy to, put your application in, use a quick apply and think that you're working. But, like, the job hunt really is, if you're hunting for a job, like, that is your full-time job, and
Yep.
you need to do everything possible
Yep.
to stand out.
I coach job seekers a lot. I mean, I get messages all day from people on LinkedIn from all over the world. And I do one-on-one consulting and coaching with job seekers as well. And the one thing I say to all of them is that you have to be your own best advocate and you have to think outside the box when it comes to job searching. And I always tell the story of what happened with me. The other thing I want to mention, which is how I got my job prior to my current job after I left my company of 18 years, was through my network. The other thing I talk about a lot on like podcasts and LinkedIn live events, and even what I share with job seekers is that the best way of finding a job is to network. Like we were talking about earlier, if there is a position posted and it has 1,000 applicants, I am not going to personally, I don't think it's worth my time because the chances of actually getting a call competing with 1,000 people is so small. Um, Networking is by far the most effective way in finding a job, and that is just as simple as writing on a piece of paper all the people you know, your relatives, your friends, your former colleague. Because what happens is they know people, and then those people know people, so it kind of spiders out from there. And that's what happened. When I left my job of 18 years, I literally was like, "Oh my god, I have to find a job," and I haven't done this in my, I don't know, 18 years it's been since I've looked for a job, and I literally took out a piece of paper and wrote down pretty much everyone I knew, and one by one, I either called those people or sent them an email. And one of the people that I reached out to was a gentleman who was a consultant on my team many, many years ago. And him and I hadn't talked in a couple of years, but I'm like, you know what? We had a good relationship. I'm going to reach out to him. And I sent him an email and he said, actually, my company is looking to hire recruiters. Why don't you send me your resume? And that day I sent him my resume, and within 1 week, I had a job. And that was because he was in my network and I reached out to my network. So the two ways that I found a job for my current job and prior job, one was the networking and one was reaching out directly to the CEO of the company. So I am proof that doing those things actually work.
And you're making me think of like my career before we started our company. I think maybe my first job out of college, I got through an application, I just applying to it, but I think almost every single opportunity was just me cold messaging recruiters. Like, hey, I see there's an opening, or I'm looking at making a move to like this city. I built out like perfect example is moving from Orlando to Tampa back in the OG days of LinkedIn, like when we weren't using it as much. I literally found every single government contractor company that built out a list of every single recruiter and reached out to every single one of them.
I'm telling
I
you,
got it.
these things work, and I'm proof of that, and you're proof of that. And I understand too. A lot of people say to me, "Well, networking is hard, and I'm not really outgoing, and I don't want to be rejected." But when you're looking for a job, you have to do everything you can to try to find a job, and sometimes you have to jump out of that comfort zone that you have because it works, and it worked for me. I mean, I personally I don't shy away from that. My thought is, if they don't get back to me, these people that I reach out to, then it's their loss because I know what I could bring to the table and I never took it personally. And one thing I always say to job seekers is don't take rejection personally. It's not necessarily have anything to do with you. It's simply because there could be a variety of reasons why you didn't get called in for the interview or why you didn't get a job, and a lot of it again has nothing to do with you. But when you're job searching, it's really important. You have to have that thick skin and you have to just put yourself out there because you only need that one yes. You only need that one yes.
Well, and that goes into the next question. So, like, we've done the hard work, we've done the networking, we've done the reaching out, the cold emails, the cold calls, like hopping on a phone. We get to the interview. In this market, there's a lot of really good people interviewing. How do you actually stand out in 2024 when you're interviewing as a recruiter?
Well, I think the first thing is to do your research about everything you can about the organization. Um, so if this was me looking for a job right now and I had an interview, I would be studying the company's website. I would be studying the company's leadership team, their culture, their values, their products, their competitors. Everything I could get my hands on, I would in terms of understanding the company. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, candidates for the jobs I recruit for, that have no idea what my company does, or the client I'm working for, they have no idea what that company does. And that shows me that they didn't do their homework. So it's incredibly important to um, be prepared to talk about the company, be prepared to talk about why you would be a good fit for the role and to share your accomplishments. And when I say accomplishments, I'm talking about quantifiable accomplishments. It's not just, yeah, I hired 10 people a month and these were the positions. It's what was your time to fill? Were you able to save the company any money? Were you able to slash any time off of, your recruiting efforts? It's the quantifiable figures to me that stand out versus someone just saying, yeah, this is what I did and this was my day to day. Interviewing is a time to put your best foot forward and pat yourself on the back. This is a time to allow yourself to be shown in the most positive light that you can because you're on the hot seat. And I don't mean that like in a negative way, but your job as an interviewer, or I should say, interviewing for a job is to make sure that the person across the desk from you is saying to themselves, I have to hire Melissa because she would be an awesome recruiter. So again, do your homework, understand the business, and with LinkedIn as a tool, read some of the posts that the company has done. Go on their company website. There's so much information out there nowadays that there's almost no excuse for a candidate not to come prepared. And then show energy, show enthusiasm, show motivation, show that you're a hard worker, show that you can get along great with other people, that you have a sense of urgency. But again, interviewing is a time to just pat yourself on the back and just boast about what you've done because you want to give that person that's interviewing you a reason to want to shout, I must have Melissa Grabiner on my team. That's really your job when you're interviewing. Just be as prepared as you can. I would also say to always follow up with a thank you note. Now, I know I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn. There's been a lot of debate about this. There are a lot of recruiters that say thank you notes are not necessary anymore. I disagree. When I receive thank you notes from candidates, I think it's awesome. And I love receiving thank you notes. There's no harm in doing it. And to thank someone for their time, also allowing you to express your interest in the position. So it's not just thank you for taking the time to meet with me. It's reiterating why you're interested in the job. And again, why you would be a great fit for the job. So I would say to anyone who's interviewing, send a thank you note. And if you're interviewing with 5 different people, send 5 different thank you notes.
I mean,
I feel very strongly about that.
and I mean, it's one of those things that I, I think it also helps set you apart too.
Oh, 100. Great point. Absolutely.
And if you want to get a good laugh, and this goes to my next question, are you talking about when sending a thank you note, is it sending an email or is it actually sending an actual physical note?
I think an email, because the thing with the physical note is that it might take some time to get there. It
Okay.
could get lost in the mail. I would definitely say send an email because let's say you're interviewing on a Monday and they're making a decision on a Tuesday. They're going to get that handwritten note after that decision's made. Definitely send an email versus a handwritten note.
Okay. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do love handwritten notes. It is like a secret weapon, but you are right about the timeline. They could be making a decision within 24 hours.
No, handwritten notes are great. There's no question. And I love the kind of the sincerity behind it, but it's a timing factor,
Mhm.
which is why I think an email is best.
So there's a few people that I've recently given advice to, and I know it's super not popular on TikTok, but if you're going for the interview, doing a little bit of homework and actually like putting together a candidate list for some of their openings or like building out a presentation, do you advise people to kind of like do a little extra work
I think
or
it
not?
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate on this too on LinkedIn, and I have pretty strong opinions on this. I think for a recruiter, it is absolutely a great idea to be proactive. Go on the company website, look at 5 roles, for example, and then do some homework and come up with, I guess, sample candidate profiles of who you think would be great people based on the job duties and this description and the responsibilities, because that shows that you are really taking it an extra step. And what interviewer wouldn't love to see that? I mean, if I was interviewing a recruiter and they took the proactive approach by actually going on the website, looking at those openings and coming up with their own candidate profiles, like that's impressive. So yes, I 100% think that's a great idea. There's no
Okay.
harm in at all in doing something like that.
And I know that's not popular on TikTok, but it's like, it's just some of these things can really just set you a little farther apart.
And that's what the job search is about, especially in today's market. It's setting yourself apart from other people. That's why I say do your homework, write a thank you note, come prepared. Any little thing you can do to set yourself apart from someone else is only a good thing.
Awesome. So once we get the job, you land the job, you talked about some things like metrics and numbers and being prepared for your interview and being able to talk about those things. That kind of goes into my next question is like, you have a job right now. What are some of the things that you need to prepare for your next opportunity down the road?
In terms of like how to prepare yourself for like just
You're not,
generally speaking.
well, let's just say like, generally speaking for like, I always think that the best time to prepare for your next job search is when you're happy, but make sure like all your stuff is together, lined up. Like, what are some of the things that recruiters should be doing now to prepare for a future job search?
Yeah, I mean, and I would say this for recruiters and really for anyone is always have your resume updated, always have your LinkedIn profile updated and optimized. Because you never know when you're going to get hit with a layoff because it happens to people all the time. And usually the people that are the most surprised are the ones that don't see it coming because they're the ones that think they're safe when the reality is that unfortunately no one's safe anymore. But always be ready that if you get that call that you are laid off, you're like, okay, I got this. My resume is already updated. My LinkedIn profile is optimized. My you know, my page has all the things I've done in the past. And I would also say to stand out is take as many trainings as you can. Try to get certified. I know there's different sort of like HR, like talent acquisition certifications to include sourcing. LinkedIn Learning has a huge amount of courses that you can take for free. That even in the talent acquisition space, there's a huge amount of courses. Take those courses and just become as familiar as you can about your craft. Um, the more training you have, the better. I don't think it's necessary that someone goes back to school and gets like a master's in HR. I don't have a master's degree. It never stopped me with my career. But just always be learning, always be developing. Networking is so critical. And I would say for anyone, always be networking. Even when you have a job, always be networking because by the time you get laid off, you're going to want to rely on that network pretty heavily.
Well, and next question, like you just get that layoff notice in the next like 48 hours to the next week. What are some of the first things that you should do?
Okay, so for me, I'm just putting myself in the shoes
Mhm.
of the individual. The first thing I would do is I would take a couple days to just get my thoughts together, recharge, just chill for a couple days. Not go into panic mode, take a little bit of time, come up with a game plan, rely on your family and friends. I would also then start writing down your list of contacts. Literally take a piece of paper. This is exactly what I did when I left my company after 18 years. You take a piece of paper, you write down everybody you know, family, friends, former colleagues, former bosses, anyone in your network. And then you have a list and then you start reaching out to those people. So depending on your relationship with the person, you can call them, you can send them an email, you can reach out on LinkedIn. I would say have your resume perfect. Make sure it's optimized. It is to your liking and it's ready to be sent to anyone and everyone. And your LinkedIn profile being optimized. I cannot stress this enough. As a recruiter myself, I am constantly looking on profiles on LinkedIn. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile is always optimized. And I would say get active on LinkedIn. Start posting on LinkedIn, start replying to other people's posts on LinkedIn. People often ask me how I've amassed so many followers. And it's not just because I post at least once a day, it's because I engage with other people's posts. And the more you're out there on the platform, the more people are going to see you and the bigger your following is going to grow. And that's only going to help you when you're looking for some new opportunities. But the other thing I would say is during the job search, take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, your physical health. Job searching is a full-time job, in my opinion, but take the time to do what makes your heart and soul happy. Eat well, get sleep, work out, take care of yourself, because if you're not mentally okay and physically okay, it's going to be that much harder to embark on an effective job search.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I
and the
think
other
you're
and the other thing I would say too, if I may, is I can't stress this enough. There's no shame in being unemployed. A lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn and they say, I'm so embarrassed. I just lost my job. There's no reason to be embarrassed. These are broader, big business decisions that have nothing to do with you. I mean, the vast amount of time when people get laid off, it's a business decision and it's with a mass amount of people. Some of the people that I know that have been laid off have been like senior vice presidents, huge money makers for the company, but the reality is that there's no such thing as company loyalty anymore. And if you as the employee no longer serve your company for whatever reason, you're going to get laid off. That's just, I look at my father, he's a CPA and he worked at his company for 30 years. Back then, that's what people did. They worked at their companies for their entire career. Nowadays, no one does it anymore. And me working at Takeda for 18 years, that's a long time. People switch jobs every couple of years. People get laid off. It happens to the best employees out there. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's no reason to be embarrassed. A layoff is it happens to it doesn't it could happen to anyone, and your job isn't who you are, your job is what you do. You know, my job is what I do. It's not who I am. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a yoga instructor, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. My job is just a portion of my life, but it's not who I am. It's what I do. There's a big difference.
And I love that you kind of you hit a lot of great points there. And it's one of the things that I think a lot of people do is their job becomes their full identity.
Mhm.
And I love that you talked about the things outside of work that are part of your identity. So the job's not the full thing. So when you do get hit with a layoff and it's the only thing going on, like it hurts so much more.
It does, and I think and I understand this to a degree because a lot of people get their identity and get their self-fulfillment and they get their confidence from their jobs, but there's more to people than their job. Again, it's what we do, it's not who we are, and if someone meets me for the first time and they say, "So what do you do?" I'd say, "I'm a mom of 2 boys, I'm a wife, and I happen to work in human resources or talent acquisition." That wouldn't be the first thing that came to my mind about my profession because there are things in my life that are more important. And exactly, Benjamin, to your point, I think so many people get wrapped up in their job as their whole identity. But then what happens when your job lays you off? All of a sudden that identity is gone because you're so tied to that one identity. That's why it's important to have more to your life than just your job.
Mm, I love that. Well,
So
before we ask you a few more questions, is there any other things that you want to talk about when it comes to the job search for recruiters?
yeah, I would say don't be shy again to put yourself out there. The more people that know you're looking for a job, the better your chances of finding a job. Just network with I know we talked about this, but just network with as many people as you can. Become more active on LinkedIn and don't take the rejection personally. Think about it this way. If a company is hiring one recruiter and 500 recruiters apply, there's a really small chance you're going to get that job because it's a numbers game, right? So don't take rejection personally. It's part of the process. It's part of your story, your job searching story. I've been rejected from jobs before. Does it sting for a minute? But then I get past it. And my thought has always been, and this is what seekers should think about too, is it's the company's loss. If a company's going to pass you over, it's their loss more than it's going to be your loss. Look at it that
Mm,
way too.
100%. 100%. And real quick, you've amassed almost 300,000 followers on LinkedIn. Like for recruiters out there that are looking at making growing their LinkedIn following and growing their network, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah. So I started consistently posting on LinkedIn maybe about 5 months ago. And I decided to use the platform to be an advocate for job seekers. And so what I started to do is I started to post consistently. So I post at least once a day. But even more importantly, that I have found them posting, it's reacting to the people that comment on your post and it's reacting to other people's posts. That's how my following has really grown. Because if you comment on someone else's post, all of a sudden, so many people are going to see your comment and they might be like, oh, Melissa Grabiner, she looks interesting. I'm going to click on her profile. And then all of a sudden you get these new requests of followers, right? And so just be active on the platform um, and have maybe a purpose. So use the platform to have a voice about something. I chose my voice to be again advocate for job seekers because I feel so passionate about it, because I hear so many horror stories from job seekers multiple times a day from people all over the world. So I decided to use the platform as a way to provide motivation, share stories. But over time, my following just kind of grew and it kind of just took off and now kind of has a life of its own. But it's been a really fun journey on LinkedIn. I've enjoyed it very much. I mean, Benjamin, that's how I met you. And a lot of the people that I do podcasts with and LinkedIn Live events and some of my brand partners, I found out, they found me or I found them on LinkedIn. But just get yourself out there and it takes time, right? It takes time to build a following. It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to have some days where you're going to have a lot of people follow you. You're going to have other days where you're going to have maybe two or three, if not less. Every day is different, but just be consistent. Consistency is the best advice I have in regards to LinkedIn. Just be consistent.
I think being consistent is a big one, but I think one of the most underestimated things is commenting on other people's posts with great comments.
100%.
It is like the
100%.
secret weapon in 2024 on LinkedIn right now.
It is, and a lot of people reach out to me on with direct messages, and they say, "Oh, Melissa, I saw you comment on so and so's post. I really love what you said. I'd love to be your follower. I'd love to connect with you." So it's a combination of posting, but I even think more importantly, it's again commenting on other people's posts and always speaking with your audience. So I feel like if people have take the time to comment on my post, I owe it to them to respond to the comments that they leave on those posts.
Absolutely love that. And this is great advice. There are many of us recruiters that have been on this platform for, I think I'm just like a few months shy of 20 years. And the platform has changed so much. And I
Mhm.
don't laugh. Like you said, 5 months ago, you started leaning in. Like probably about 6 months ago myself, I was like, well, like, either hate the game or hate the player. I hate the game, which is LinkedIn. I'm like, but I got to learn how to play the game.
Yeah, it's a great I mean, LinkedIn I actually posted about this today. LinkedIn literally has changed my life. And never would I have thought 6 months ago to say that, but it's changed my life. I'm telling you, it's a great platform. It's by far my favorite platform of any of them is LinkedIn,
I'm,
without
I'm,
question.
I'm with you on that. Like if for the listeners, if you guys want a good laugh, like I now share the baby pictures on LinkedIn rather than Facebook. And like, I know the thing is like, like it used to be taboo to share personal stories and personal pictures, but like people are seeing like my full life on LinkedIn and it's become
Mhm.
like my brand.
People are doing that now. People are being more, I guess, bringing their whole selves to the platform. In other words, I see a lot of people post pictures of their kids, post more personal stories. I post some personal stories sometimes on LinkedIn. It allows you to be more authentic with your audience, and I think that really resonates with a lot of people, that authenticity.
Love that. Well, jumping over to the quick fire questions, and this is, they don't have to be quick answers. So you, if you run into like a recruiter that's actually just getting started in the recruiting industry this year, what advice would you give to them to succeed in the space?
I would say to understand their business inside and out, understand the competitors, understand um, the products, be strategic. I would also say that their main customers are two sets of people. It's their candidates and it's their hiring managers. And if you can build credibility with your hiring managers and your candidates, you're going to do just fine. Um, I believe very strongly that recruiting it is a partnership between the recruiter and the hiring manager. So it's important to establish credibility with your managers, establish trust, um, and always be an advocate for your candidates and always provide a great candidate experience. It's incredibly important for the employer brand, and it's simply just the right thing to do. And then again, just try to understand the business and be a strategic partner. Don't be tactile. Recruiting isn't just filling jobs and having intake discussions and creating offer letters. Be a strategic partner to the business.
Love that. Same question for the recruiters that have been in the game for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Like, what advice would you give to them to see success?
I would say don't get stale. Maybe think about different ways to do your job. Maybe think about, I'm a big proponent of change and always reinventing the wheel to see like if there's ways to make processes more efficient, more effective, more streamlined, cheaper, faster. So think outside the box and don't get so set in your ways because there might be better ways of doing your job. And I would say also is just become as embedded in the business as you can and provide the best service as possible to those two sets of customers, which are again the candidates and your hiring managers, and just don't get stale.
I
Don't
love
get
that
stale.
don't get stale because you can catch yourself getting stale so
Oh,
easily.
I think for anyone in any job, I think that holds true for sure. Mhm.
Do you have a book that's had a huge impact on your own personal career?
So I have a book that is my favorite book, but it is more not because of my career. There's a book I read called Eat, Pray, Love by Cheryl Strayed. It was actually turned into a movie starring Julia Roberts, and it's about a woman who lost her mother and decided to take a year and travel all over the world by herself. And it talked about her journey, and it was incredibly inspirational. And that was probably the best book I ever read. I read a lot of business books. I read a lot of I love, like, biographies. I just watched the Bill Gates special on Netflix, which I thought was incredibly interesting. I read a lot of like, business articles. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read all the LinkedIn news. But in terms of, like, my favorite book, that has to be a book that I read for pleasure and not for business. So, sorry.
No, I think that's perfect. Did it spur you to take more trips?
Yeah. And to realize that, you know what, you have one life and live it to the fullest.
Mm, I love that. Do you have like a favorite rec tech tool that you love at the moment?
It's interesting. There are so many new pieces of technology for recruiters now. I mean, it's a space that's literally saturated. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was starting to be a recruiter, there were two main applicant tracking systems. There was Brass Ring and Taleo. Just like there were 2 job boards. Do we go with monster.com or do we go with hotjobs.com? But nowadays, there are literally hundreds of recruiting platforms. I like a tool called Teal, Teal, and a tool called Ramped, Ramped. I think those are great tools for job seekers. It helps, there's so many good about both tools, but, those are the 2 that I would recommend the most. Again, Teal and Ramped are my favorites.
I haven't heard of Ramp. I'll check it out. But like anytime somebody comes at me with like they're looking for a job, and I'm like, go to
Teal's great.
tealhq.com. It is like
Teal's
going to be the
great.
best thing for you.
Yeah, I've been a partner of theirs for maybe 5 months now, 4
Oh,
months
nice.
now. Yeah, they're a great tool. I love their content on LinkedIn. They
Hmm.
truly they're just it's a great platform. A very if I was looking for a job, I would be on Teal every day.
Awesome. Now, when it comes to your own personal success, what do you think has been a huge driver for it?
I think I've had a husband who's always been supportive of my career. Working full time, raising 2 kids has not always been easy, and especially when my boys were young, I would travel a lot, and a lot of it was like, "Listen, we need you on a plane tomorrow to California," and so a lot of my travel was a moment's notice. Um, I've always had a supportive husband. My parents have always been supportive. My in-laws live 10 minutes away, and they've been incredibly helpful when I've had a pinch with my boys or I had to stay late at the office. I don't know what I would have done many times if it wasn't for my in-laws. They've been amazing. But I've just always had a supportive family behind me and my champions and my biggest supporters. Um, I think that's been very helpful throughout the years for sure.
That's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Well, and if you can go back in time to like your first recruiting or HR job with everything that you've learned, the ups, downs, the pain, like everything, the success, what advice would you give yourself if you got a chance to have a cup of coffee with yourself back then?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I would say that recruiting is not always an easy job. A lot of people say, "Oh, Melissa, that's so cool. You're a recruiter. You make people job offers." And yeah, while that's true, what people don't see are the calls I make telling people they didn't get the job. What I would call, I hate the word rejection, but what I would call rejection calls. Recruiting is not easy. You're juggling many balls in the air at once. There's constantly a shifting change of priorities. You have to love working with people, and you have to love it's a busy job and it's demanding, and you have to be okay with that. Um, I would say the biggest advice is get to know the business and build credibility with your business partners and build credibility with your candidates and always treat candidates with respect. There are times I admit in my career where I didn't follow up with a candidate and they would interview with the company and I'd be like, okay, well then, you know, they'll figure it out. Candidate experience is everything when it comes to recruiting. Um, but being a strategic partner and building trusting relationships with your hiring managers That to me is probably the most important thing.
Great
And
advice.
that it's okay to say no. Sometimes you're only one person. You can only do so much. Sometimes you got to say no and be okay with it because you can only do what you can do.
When did you finally learn the power of no?
I think when I had enough confidence in myself to be able to say no. Um, and I think that happened when I was talking a little bit earlier about my journey into recruiting was when the senior leaders tapped me on the shoulder to start this department. I was so thrilled that they had the confidence in me to do that, that confidence allowed me to push back on them when I had to and say, "You came to me because you trusted me." And it wasn't easy building a department and going through requests for proposals with different vendors and implementing systems. It was a lot of work, but I had the confidence to push back when I needed to because I knew it was the best thing for my team or for the business or for our candidates. And that's
And
when I really learned it was when I had the confidence in myself to be okay with saying no.
and kind of on that same thread, like when you got that request and that opportunity, is there something that you did beforehand that really made you stand out? That they like tapped you on the shoulder?
I think they just saw me as someone who worked hard and was committed to the company. And and I'm not saying this in a boastful way, but I think I'm pretty easy to work with. I'm very approachable. I'm not argumentative. I see both sides of all situations. And they just saw that I was committed and I was a hard worker and I did a really good job being an HR business partner. And I think doing a good job and kind of proving myself allowed them to have the confidence to know that I would put 100% effort into this new endeavor. And I was
Mm.
very blessed. And because they were so good to me and because they gave me this amazing opportunity, I worked that much harder for them.
That's awesome.
So it was a
Well,
win-win.
before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
No, I would just say, for anyone looking for a job is that it's full of highs and lows. It's full of ups and downs. It's natural in a job search. Rejection is part of the process. I would say don't take rejection personally. Every day is a new day for new possibilities. So look at it that way. And you only need one yes. You're not looking for 10 jobs. You just need to find that one job. And this time will not last forever. Keep your resume updated and optimized. Keep your LinkedIn profile updated and optimized. Be active on the platform. Be aggressive in your job search. If you see a job you're interested in, reach out to the CEO, reach out to the head of HR, reach out to the head of TA. Do whatever you need to do to put yourself in the forefront of the minds to beat out the competition and just do the best you can do. That's all you can ask yourself. And again, this time will not last forever.
That is awesome. Well, Melissa, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing like the actionable tips for recruiters out there because it has been an extremely tough market for across the entire industry after what felt like the golden age of recruiting. And thank you for coming on and bringing like literally actionable advice. So for the
It's my
listeners, guys,
pleasure. Yeah.
next time, and thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate you asking me. And it was lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Oh, I can't wait for this to go live.
Me too.
Talk to you soon, guys. All
Okay.
right. Bye.
Bye.